Enzo Ramirez stepped off the shuttle and onto the harsh, blackened soil of Zara 9, feeling the weight of the ridicule already pressing down on him. The alien atmosphere hung thick with clouds, casting an eerie twilight across the barren landscape. Towering spires of alien architecture loomed in the distance, their surfaces shimmering with unnatural metals. The air was dense, filled with the hum of the alien city behind him. He scanned the surroundings, instinctively tightening his grip on the pulse rifle slung across his back. Despite the tranquil appearance, this planet had a long history of volatile politics, and the peace talks between the United Earth Federation and the Hrethen could easily devolve into chaos. Enzo knew the stakes, but he also knew the eyes of the galaxy were watching. The smallest misstep could send everything into turmoil. "Stay sharp, Ramirez." Captain Lisa Trent's voice crackled through his earpiece, steady and reassuring. "The Hrethen may seem relaxed, but they're always on edge. Keep your cool." Enzo's lips twitched into a brief smile. Lisa had a knack for cutting through tension with a few well-placed words. She wasn't just his superior officer, she was the only one who saw his worth when the galaxy laughed at his small frame. "Got it, Captain," he murmured. As they approached the grand entrance to the Hrethen's embassy, Enzo could feel the eyes of the aliens on him. His size, standing just over 5.5 feet, was nothing compared to the towering figures of the Hrethen. Their muscles rippled beneath their dark gray scales, their eyes cold and calculating. Most humans who had visited Zara 9 before had been met with indifference, or outright hostility. Enzo was about to find out how they treat someone like him, a soldier too small in stature, too insignificant in their eyes to be of any real threat. The doors to the embassy hissed open, revealing a vast hall bathed in alien light. The Hrethen High Command sat in a semicircle, their eyes fixed on the humans entering. Enzo's gaze immediately locked with Krothak the Unyielding, the Hrethen High Commander. Standing a full 3 feet taller than Enzo, Krothak's presence was imposing. His eyes gleamed with an arrogance that was hard to ignore. "Ah, the humans," Krothak rumbled, his voice deep and resonating. "The tiny warriors from the farthest reaches of the galaxy." His lips curled into a sneer, exposing rows of sharp teeth. "Tell me, little human, how do you plan to speak for your species with such fragile bones?" Enzo's jaw tightened, the mockery slicing through him like a blade. He had expected this, had prepared himself for the jabs, the ridicule. But still, it stung. "You can call me tiny all you want, Krothak," he replied, his voice steady, betraying none of the anger building inside him. "But I'm the one standing here. And you'll have to deal with me." The room fell silent, the tension thickening. Krothak chuckled, low and menacing. "I find it amusing that a creature so small would come all the way here to pretend it could accomplish something." He gestured toward his aides, who snickered in unison. "What can your kind possibly offer us, human?" Enzo wanted to lash out, wanted to show the Hrethen how wrong they were. But he held his ground, keeping his composure. He had been trained for this moment. "Humanity's worth can't be measured by size or strength," he said. "What we offer is something you won't understand until you've seen it firsthand." "Enough talk," Krothak interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "Let us get to the heart of the matter. I'm sure you've brought your pathetic excuses for peace, but I already know how this will end." Enzo's chest tightened. The stakes had just escalated. The Hrethen weren't interested in peace. They wanted dominance, and they would use every opportunity to undermine humanity's place in the galaxy. Enzo had to make them see that humans weren't just a nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with. Lisa moved beside him, her gaze sharp as she met Krothak's stare. "We're not here to waste time with petty insults, Krothak," she said coldly. "You wanted a negotiation, and you'll get one. But don't mistake our size for weakness. You'll learn that soon enough." Krothak's eyes flicked between the two humans, an unsettling calm settling over him. "We'll see if your bravado holds up once you've faced the true power of the Hrethen." A long silence stretched between them. Enzo's heart beat heavily in his chest, but his mind raced, calculating his every move. He couldn't afford to lose his temper now. The mission was too important. Then, A faint beep sounded from his wrist communicator. Enzo's eyes shot to the blinking red light. Lisa had already noticed, her gaze flicking to him in silent communication. The situation had just become more dangerous. "Captain, we've detected an unauthorized ship entering orbit," Enzo said, his voice low. "It's not a Hrethan vessel." Lisa's expression hardened. "Get ready. We need to move now." But before they could react, Krothak's voice rang out, mocking once more. "It seems you've been distracted, little human. I suppose this is what you call your strength, distraction." Enzo clenched his fists, but before he could retort, the room's lights flickered, and a low hum echoed through the building. Suddenly, alarms blared, and a voice boomed from the embassy's comms system. "Emergency! Unknown forces have breached the perimeter. All personnel, defend the embassy!" Krothak's mocking demeanor evaporated as he stood, his posture straightening. "Looks like we have company, after all," he said, his voice colder now. Enzo exchanged a glance with Lisa, who gave him a sharp nod. This wasn't just a test of diplomacy, it was a test of survival. And he wasn't about to let the Hrethan underestimate humanity any longer. They had no idea what was coming. With a swift motion, Enzo unslung his rifle, setting his jaw as he prepared for the inevitable. The ridicule would have to wait. There were bigger problems now. And the Hrethan would soon learn that a human warrior, small or not, could be a force to be reckoned with. As the doors to the chamber slammed shut, sealing them inside, Enzo's voice cut through the tension. "Let's show them what we're made of, Captain." Lisa grinned. "It's about time." And just like that, the real fight began. The shrill alarm blared through the Hrethan embassy, its urgency cutting through the building's vast corridors. Enzo Ramirez's pulse quickened as the walls trembled with the distant sound of explosions. The lights flickered, casting long shadows over the room, adding a sense of chaos to the growing tension. The Hrethan, once so confident, now moved with purpose, their earlier arrogance replaced by a cautious wariness. "Captain, we need to move," Enzo said, his voice calm but firm, betraying none of the anxiety gnawing at him. He had trained for moments like this, but the threat was real now. "We can't stay here." Lisa Trent stood beside him, her stance ready, her eyes scanning the room. "Agreed. We can't afford to be cornered in here." She turned to Krothak, who was now standing rigid, his face locked in a grimace of frustration. "You're a soldier, Krothak," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't just a negotiation anymore. It's an invasion. Help us protect the embassy, or we'll all be dead before we can talk peace." Krothak's cold gaze flickered to her, his lip curling in distaste. "This is your mess, human. Do not presume to tell me how to handle it." Enzo stepped forward, his voice sharp. "I don't care who starts it. We're all in the same boat now, and you'd better be ready to swim." He adjusted the strap of his pulse rifle, the weight of it now oddly comforting. Lisa shot him a quick look, silently telling him to keep his cool, but Enzo knew the stakes. This wasn't about diplomacy anymore. This was survival. They had to make it out of the embassy alive if there was any hope of salvaging the peace talks. And that meant proving that the humans weren't just small in stature, they were deadly. Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled with the force of another explosion. The Hrethan soldiers around Krothak began to shift uneasily, clearly unsettled by the growing attack. The lights flickered again, then shut off entirely, leaving the room in near darkness. Lisa's voice was a steady whisper. "We're on our own, Ramirez. They're not going to help us." Enzo nodded, his heart rate steadying as adrenaline took over. "We don't need them." The sound of boots stomping through the darkened hall signaled the arrival of their attackers. Enzo couldn't see them, but he could feel their presence, closing in. The human soldiers had always relied on more than just brute strength to win battles. It was their ingenuity, their ability to adapt to any environment, that made them dangerous. And right now, in the thick of it, Enzo was counting on that very trait to keep them alive. "Stay low, stay silent," Enzo murmured, crouching by the nearest wall. He gestured for Lisa to do the same, and she moved swiftly, taking position opposite him. The Hrethan soldiers, despite their size and strength, weren't trained for urban warfare, and Enzo knew it. Their tactics were designed for open battles, far removed from the claustrophobic hallways and tight corners of the embassy. That gave them an edge. At least for now. Enzo checked the ammo in his pulse rifle, mentally counting the shots remaining. He'd have to make every one count. On my mark, he whispered, eyes scanning the shadows. Lisa gave him a curt nod. She didn't need to be told twice. A burst of gunfire erupted down the hall, followed by the unmistakable hiss of alien blasters. The Hrethan soldiers opened fire, their weapons lighting up the darkened corridor in streaks of green energy. Enzo's instincts kicked in. He dove forward, rolling to the side just as a blast whizzed past his shoulder, scorching the wall behind him. His pulse rifle snapped up, and he fired without hesitation, the concentrated pulse of energy streaking through the air. One of the Hrethan soldiers dropped with a thud, his body crumpling against the wall. The others hesitated for only a moment, too shocked by the speed of the attack. Enzo took advantage of their confusion, firing again and ducking behind a pillar as more shots whizzed past him. He didn't stop to admire his kill. He knew there would be more. The hallway was alive with gunfire and chaos. Lisa's voice cut through the noise. "Move!" she shouted, leaping into action, her rifle at the ready. Enzo followed her, crouching low and moving swiftly toward the exit. Another explosion echoed from the outer perimeter, signaling that their attackers were breaching deeper into the embassy. Enzo's mind raced. The Hrethan might be strong, but humanity had something that made them dangerous in ways the aliens couldn't anticipate: creativity. Where the Hrethan saw a battlefield, humanity saw a puzzle to be solved. "Ramirez," Lisa called, pulling him out of his thoughts. "We need to get to the control room. We can lock down the lower levels from there. Buy ourselves some time." Enzo's eyes flicked toward the entrance to the control room, now just a few meters away. "On it!" They sprinted toward the door, but before they could reach it, another wave of Hrethan soldiers rounded the corner. Enzo's pulse quickened, but he didn't hesitate. He ducked low, activating a small device on his wrist, a smoke grenade. With a quick twist, he tossed it into the center of the corridor. The room was immediately filled with thick, swirling smoke, reducing visibility to near zero. The Hrethan soldiers cursed in their native tongue, disoriented by the sudden change in environment. Enzo didn't waste a second. He used the smoke as cover to dash forward, weaving through the haze and slamming into the control room door. His fingers flew over the console as he initiated the lockdown sequence. Lisa stood guard, scanning the darkened corridor, her rifle ready. The seconds felt like hours, but finally, the door slid open with a soft hiss. "Done," Enzo muttered, stepping into the control room. Lisa followed, closing the door behind them. The security lights flickered to life, casting a dull red glow over the room. "That'll hold them for a while," she said, breathing heavily. Enzo's heart was still pounding, but his focus remained sharp. "We need to find out who's behind this. This wasn't just a random attack." Lisa nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Agreed. We'll get to the bottom of this. But first, we have to survive." They turned to face the control panel. Enzo began tapping commands into the system, pulling up a map of the embassy's layout. "We can't rely on the Hrethan for help, but we've got a chance to turn the tide. If we can locate their communications hub, we can tap into their frequencies. Find out who's really pulling the strings here." Lisa glanced at the map, then at Enzo. "Let's move." Enzo's fingers flew across the console, his mind running through dozens of scenarios in mere seconds. He didn't need to rely on muscle. He knew how to use his brain to turn the tide. As the door to the control room locked behind them, he allowed himself a small, grim smile. The Hrethan had underestimated humanity again, and this time, they were going to regret it. The control room door sealed shut with a soft hiss, but Enzo Ramirez didn't waste time feeling relieved. The Hrethan were only one step behind. He turned to the screen, his fingers moving quickly across the interface, scanning the security feeds, looking for any sign of the attacker's movements. Lisa Trent stood beside him, her eyes sharp, her breathing steady despite the chaos that had unfolded in the past hour. "We can't hold up in here forever. We need to make a move." Enzo didn't look away from the screen. "Agreed. We need to take control of the situation. The longer we stay in here, the more time we give them to regroup." He pulled up a map of the embassy, tracing the corridors leading to the communications hub. "If we can tap into their network, we can find out who's behind the attack. If this is an assassination attempt on the peace talks, we'll be ready." Lisa nodded. "We don't know who we're up against yet. We might be dealing with more than just Hrethan insurgents." She paused, considering the gravity of the situation. "But if they've come for us, we have to assume we're on their radar now. They won't let us leave here alive unless we fight back." Enzo's jaw tightened. "Then let's make sure they regret that decision." The plan was simple: move fast, stay unpredictable, and disable their communications before they could summon reinforcements. The Hrethan might be physically superior, but humans had always won battles of wits. It was their adaptability, their ingenuity, that gave them an edge. And Enzo wasn't about to let anyone forget that. They moved quickly through the hallways, staying low and using the walls for cover. Every sound, every vibration beneath their feet, made their nerves tingle with anticipation. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a test. A test to show that the Hrethan, and the galaxy at large, had underestimated humanity. "Second floor's up ahead," Lisa whispered, checking her weapon as they moved. "We should be able to access the comm hub from there." Enzo nodded, adjusting the strap on his rifle. His pulse was steady, but his mind was calculating every move. There were no second chances now. They reached the elevator, and Enzo's finger hovered over the button. He paused, listening for any sign of movement. The silence was deafening. Too quiet. He exchanged a glance with Lisa, who raised an eyebrow, silently questioning if he was certain. Enzo pressed the button. "We don't have time to waste. Let's move." The elevator doors slid open, and they stepped inside, the doors closing with a soft chime. They could hear nothing but their own breathing, each second feeling like an eternity. Enzo's thoughts raced, running through every possible scenario. He didn't want to think too far ahead, he had to keep his focus on the present. But his mind kept returning to the mocking face of Krothak, the alien commander who had so eagerly belittled him. He wanted to prove, not just to Krothak, but to every species in the galaxy, that humans weren't just the little warriors they thought them to be. They were far more dangerous. The elevator stopped with a jolt, and the doors slid open. Enzo and Lisa stepped out into a long corridor. Ahead, the comm hub was just a few doors away, but the air felt thick with danger. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. He could feel it. The Hrethan weren't far behind. The soft click of a weapon being cocked made Enzo's heart skip a beat. He immediately motioned for Lisa to get low, and they slid behind a row of supply crates. Peering out from their cover, Enzo's eyes narrowed as a squad of Hrethan soldiers appeared, their eyes scanning the hallways, moving with military precision. "They know we're here," Lisa muttered. "Time to move fast." Enzo didn't hesitate. They couldn't afford to wait. They trained for this. Human ingenuity could win battles, but timing was everything. He looked at Lisa, his lips forming the slightest grin. "Let's give them a surprise." They moved swiftly, hugging the wall as the Hrethan soldiers advanced, their blasters raised and ready. Enzo reached into his pouch and pulled out a small device, a disruptor grenade. He held it for a beat, then tossed it down the corridor. The device emitted a high-pitched whine, then a brilliant flash of light. The soldiers screamed in disarray as their weapons malfunctioned, their communications cut off. "Now!" Enzo shouted. He bolted toward the comm hub door, Lisa right behind him. The door hissed open with a simple swipe of the control panel, and they rushed inside. The room was dimly lit, rows of blinking consoles and alien screens stretched out before them. The hum of the machinery seemed almost comforting in the chaos. Enzo's fingers flew across the console, accessing the Hrethan communications network. Lisa stood guard at the door, watching for any sign of movement. Done, Enzo said, his voice low but triumphant. The console beeped in confirmation, and he quickly downloaded the coordinates of the attacker's location. But as he moved to lock the system down, an alarm blared, a sudden, overwhelming sound that shook the room. Not good, Lisa said, her eyes scanning the corridor outside. Enzo's mind raced. The Hrethen would be onto them now. He had to act fast. We've got their location, but we've also alerted their forces, he said. We need to move, now. The door slid open just as a dozen Hrethen soldiers appeared in the hall, their weapons raised and ready. Enzo cursed under his breath. There was no time to escape the way they came. We're fighting our way out, Lisa said, her voice tight but resolute. Enzo checked his pulse rifle, steeling himself for what was about to come. The odds were stacked against them, but there was no turning back. Let's show them what humanity is capable of. The first Hrethen soldier burst into the room, firing immediately. Enzo dove behind a console, returning fire with precise shots. His rifle crackled, sending energy bolts that lit up the darkened room. The Hrethen retaliated with bursts of green laser fire, but Enzo ducked and weaved, moving quickly and decisively. Lisa took out one of the soldiers, her shot accurate and swift, cutting through the chaos like a predator in the wild. More Hrethen soldiers poured into the room, but Enzo and Lisa were ready. The battle was quick, violent, but the humans moved with purpose, their training allowing them to outmaneuver the Hrethen, who struggled in the tight, close-quarters environment. The two soldiers fought together with a brutal synchronicity, each anticipating the other's moves, covering each other's blind spots. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the Hrethen soldiers collapsed to the ground. Enzo's chest heaved with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. The mission was far from over. We've got their location, Lisa said, glancing down at her wrist calm. Let's finish this. Enzo nodded. They had come to prove something. And as the smoke cleared and the Hrethen lay in defeat around them, one thing was certain: humanity was not to be underestimated.